You're listening to The David Knight Show.
Welcome back. We have the Supreme Court refusing to block the bump stock ban. Now, this is a case that was brought by Gun Owners of America. I've talked to Larry Pratt about this. He's been on the show. Talked about how they were going to sue to stop this because although this is not an important device from the standpoint of self-defense, it is kind of a gimmick. It was a fun thing that some shooters did. And yet, it is very important from a principle of regulation standpoint. You have to remember that this was something that had been declared legal by both the George W. Bush and the Obama administration. The ATF it's the biggest single ATF seizure of private property in history, write the lawyers for Gun Owners of America. They say it's made even more noxious because all existing bump stocks were manufactured and purchased in accordance with ATF rulings approving their sale. So it has a flavor of ex post facto law to it, doesn't it? And of course, if they can confiscate this, they can do other things. And it has never been regulated by the ATF because it is not part of the firing mechanism. It's an accessory. They've never regulated accessories before. That's why it was legal. And so you had the Gun Owners of America suing them. Chief Justice Roberts denied a request for the Supreme Court to get involved on Tuesday. And a second request was declined by the court yesterday. Now, this is Chief Justice John Roberts, who, as we've talked about, the legal end to Obamacare that was declared this week. We've had the Justice Department say, we're not going to appeal these decisions. We've had two lower court decisions saying Obamacare is done. You had the Congress repeal the penalty, which Chief Justice John Roberts imagined was kind of like a tax. And so because it was kind of like a tax, we could force you to buy private products from corporations. There's no authority in the Constitution for that. But John Roberts can find authority in the Constitution for Obamacare through that kind of last-minute prevarication, as I pointed out. That's come up again this week, not only because of that ruling, but because of a biography about John Roberts, and the people writing it said, and they're not conservatives. These are people, CNN writers. That everybody they've talked to who's looked at this, they want a rationale for Obamacare, but they said everybody we looked at and talked to about this, they say his decisions make absolutely no sense. He's all over the place. He's written opinions on both sides. He was against it before he was for it. He wrote both the dissenting and the concurring opinion. There's absolutely no coherent legal argument for his position, and of course it's been struck down in many ways. It was a fraud in many ways. Fraudulent the way that they stole the money to fund the subsidies. That was the subject of a court case, stealing the money from Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac investors. Fraudulent in the pretense that it was a tax, therefore it was allowed, and on and on. But John Roberts can find Obamacare in the Constitution, but he can't find the right to keep and bear arms in the Constitution. And again, this is an accessory. And when we look at the basis for which this came out, don't forget that this is on the basis of the Las Vegas shooting. One of the dodgiest narratives we've ever gotten from the government after a disaster, after an event like that. Now, I'm not saying nobody died. I believe that people died. As a matter of fact, we played this last week again. The people who claim that we say that nobody ever died with anything, that's what they say. And they pretended that we agreed with them. And we showed you the clip of, I've covered this before. They went after the pastor who lost a daughter down at Texas, Sutherland Springs, Texas, the church there that was shot. I had Mark Collins, who had been the pastor down there at one point in time. I've had him on many times. He is the spitting image of George Washington. It's absolutely amazing. He's the same size, big man. George Washington is a big man. Same size as George Washington. You put a split screen up of the pictures of George Washington's face and his face. I mean, they are identical. That's what he's got on his business card. He goes around and he holds teaching sessions for kids in elementary school, talking about George Washington, about American history and so forth. But he was a pastor at one point in time there. He came on the day after we broke the news here nationally, as everybody, CNN was falsely reporting that The guy that had stopped him had a shotgun, and Mark said, no, I know the guy. He had an AR-15 just like the shooter, just like the killer. There he is. There's that picture. That's Mark Collins on one side and George Washington on the other. You can't tell which is which. You see him in uniform, it's amazing. And he's played George Washington on film a couple of times, most notably on Revelations, the movie. We've sold that here at InfoWars, and we've had the producer of that on many times, producer and his wife of that on. I talked to Mark Collins. Anyway, he talked to us about that, and after a few months after that, he said, well, I'm seeing all this stuff on social media about how you guys are now saying that this is fake. And I said, no, it's a lie. It's a lie. These people are falsely saying that about us. Don't believe that it was a fake. And there wasn't anything suspicious about how that shooting was reported, not like Las Vegas. The reason I bring that up is because these same people are out there saying nobody died anywhere, everything is fake, and so forth. They got into an argument with Joe Biggs, and I showed that when I had Mark Collins. I said, come on, Mark, let's talk about this. I want you to tell people what you know, the people that you know there, shut this thing down. I want to give you time to talk about this. We've never said that, even though they said we did it. And we showed you the unedited film from these people where Joe Biggs is shouting back at them saying, don't tell me nobody died in Las Vegas. I know people who did. A friend of mine still in the hospital there, whatever, at the time. But so it was a real shooting. But can we really say that the bump stock was an issue? Do we really know if it happened the way that we were told? Was it just one shooter? What was happening around that? We've had so many different phony narratives from the government. And when you look at the picture of the gun that has a bump stock, it's also got a bipod on it. Now, you wouldn't use both a bump stock and a bipod. The whole point of the bump stock is to take the recoil and to make it bounce back and forth. And of course, you can do that using the belt around your waist as well. And we've had a lot of people demonstrate that. But so it's based on a very dodgy narrative, blaming the bump stock for that shooting. If in fact a bump stock was used to spray into the crowd, they probably, as many people have said, more people would have died if they had not done that, if whoever was shooting had taken aim. Yet it goes on. It goes on. And as Reason points out, Donald Trump's bump stock ban turns peaceful gun owners into felons by fiat. By fiat. It's virtue signaling from President Trump, quite frankly, and it's shameful. They repeatedly were declared legal by the BATF during the Bush and Obama administrations, and it is especially unsettling, reports Reason, because the law has not changed at all since the agency made that determination over multiple administrations. Instead, the ATF, under orders from Donald Trump, reinterpreted the law to reach a diametrically opposite conclusion that is contrary to the plain meaning of the law. You understand how troublesome this is? The law did not change. Two administrations, they were administering the law. They don't have any authority to regulate accessories. President Trump said, do it. They did it. And it's shameful. We'll be right back. Stay with us. Welcome back. We were talking about the bump stock ban that was declared by fiat by President Trump. That should concern you. President Trump is not going to, by fiat, ban real weapons. I mean, this is a gimmick thing. This is a something that was just being used by people going out and shooting in the woods or whatever. I don't really think that it played an important part in the Las Vegas shooting, especially because the guns that we saw that had that and also had a bipod on there. If it was, in fact, used as part of that, they would have been more deadly if they had shot one at a time. It was a very suspicious event. I don't suspect that nobody died. I believe that everybody that was reported as shot did die. We talked to many people who did. So I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that we were told lie after lie after lie about what happened there. And then we were shown a picture of a gun and a device and said, go for this. And it was low-hanging fruit. It was something that President Trump and the NRA could easily throw over the side, virtue signaling these people. But it has set up some very important principles. Gun owners of America came after it and said this was declared legal. You didn't change the law. We had two administrations, and the ATF say this is not even something that we regulate. And without changing the law, they went back and banned this. And they redefined the definition of what automatic is, right? A single function of the trigger involves the mechanical movement of the mechanism that constitutes the trigger, they note. It is complete when the trigger traverses its range of motion and initiates the firing sequence. The plaintiffs point out that the word automatically means that by mechanical process and without further human intervention means to continue to fire without further human action beyond a single function of the trigger. Bump fire, by contrast, is mediated by the human intervention of repeatedly forcing the gun body and the trigger forward to re-engage the trigger after it's been returned to its starting position and has reset. And it makes the gun less accurate because you're just bouncing the thing. It's just a, hey, y'all, watch this. It's stupid, and that's why they're not fighting for it. But Gun Owners of America is right that it's a very dangerous principle, because if the president can go against the law, go against the regulations, go against the Constitution, and just by fiat ban something that has never been regulated before, an aspect of the gun that has never been regulated before, blur the lines between semi-automatic and fully automatic, that sets very dangerous precedents. Very dangerous precedent has been set by this president. And we got the New York Times pushing for ammunition control. This is the tactic that the Obama administration was pushing, trying to make it difficult for people to get ammunition, trying to come up with ideas to register ammunition, to limit the number of bullets that you could have or you could put in a magazine at a given time. Also trying to restrict access to spent brass that was used to make lower cost ammunition. They did that from the military, trying to restrict that. And so now you got the New York Times putting out a column called "People Kill People, but Bullets Seem to Matter," and talking about ammunition control. And here's what they're concerned about. They're concerned about now not the quantity of bullets, but the size of the bullets. They think that that is something that needs to be regulated. And they give the false idea that most of the guns that were out there prior to recently were mostly 22s. Well, I don't think so. You know, they're looking at, they said 45s and 357s are more deadly, and that's true percentage-wise. However, they're not broadly used. And so as they point out in this article from Breitbart, they say that 9 millimeter has become very common. When these people talk about the 38 Special, that's a 38 caliber. It's not that much different in size than a 9 millimeter. So the 38s, the 380s, the 9 millimeters are all about the same size, and they are much more popular. So you can play the statistics games two different ways. You can say a high percentage of people shot with a big caliber are killed, or you can say more people are shot with a smaller caliber because they're more popular. As a matter of fact, I guess what we should do is we should go out and ban 50 caliber muzzle loaders. You know, ban that Hawken 50 that Jeremiah Johnson used, because that thing will knock you down for sure. So this is the way they're going to roll. They're going to go after any and everything that we do, and President Trump has just fed that bear. He really has. When we look at what's going on in London, they've had a complete gun-free ban there, right? So nobody's getting shot, are they? Oh, yes, they are. You had a teenage boy has been shot dead in London just minutes after a man in his 30s was stabbed in the head. Breitbart London is pointing out gang warfare is killing more people than terror. Despite the tightest gun control firearms, they are easy to buy. And I want to point out to the liberals who may understand that drug prohibition doesn't work, I want to point out to you that gun prohibition will fail for all the same reasons. Let's go back and look at drugs, for example. We've had 48 years of prohibition. It began with a UN agenda. They created the schedules. They put the drugs in the schedules. They did it in 1961. And then Richard Nixon put his name at the bottom of the homework, put United States up at the top, and turned it in and called it a war on drugs 10 years later, 1971. So now we've had 48 years of the UN war on drugs that was enacted by Richard Nixon for the United Nations. Now, I want to ask you, is it easier or harder to buy drugs today? And are they more or less potent? Are gangs stronger and more numerous? Are the police more ruthless and uncontrolled? Are the prisons packed? Do we have people dying of overdoses of drugs in those prisons? Ask yourself these questions, and then ask yourselves, what's going to happen when we prohibit guns? All of these things all these things happened with alcohol prohibition, and they will all happen with gun prohibition. But as we're talking about London, the raid discovered it wasn't just one gun. They discovered multiple AK-47s and grenades, and these are not terrorists, but these are gangs who are fighting it out for control. Which kind of brings us to this curious event that happened yesterday, and it happened on Wednesday. You had a guy attack Scientology with a samurai sword. I thought, well, that's really strange. And as I looked it up, I tweeted out on Wednesday, I realized that this had happened about 10 years ago. It was back in July of 2009 in Hollywood. You had a guy with 2 samurai swords. And he attacked the Scientology building, and he was shot dead. And then the same thing happened again on Wednesday. And we actually have footage of this. It's now surfaced. Go ahead and roll that footage, and I'll comment as we see it. This is near the Hollywood compound there of Scientology. And you got, we want to cue this up. There we go, right there. There's the guy with the sword. And then I guess the other guy is the security guard that's there. And that's all you got. And that's the way it ended. And both of these events, the one back in 2009, the guy that was shot dead, shot by a security guard as he was going to attack the Scientology Center with samurai swords. Again, that seems to be the preferred method of these former members. I don't know what happened with the guy this week, but the guy who was killed back in 2009 was actually a former Scientologist. 15 years earlier, he and another guy had sued a UCLA professor who had been speaking out against Scientology. They thought that the professor was discriminating against them. The case was dropped. They said, you don't have standing. And then 15 years later, he's attacking Scientology with a sword. And I tweeted this out, and I said, what is this about swords? Well, it turns out that there is a connection with L. Ron Hubbard, the science fiction writer who created the science fiction of Scientology. He had a manuscript called Excalibur. It seems to be something there about swords. But don't forget, Tom Cruise is actually a god to these people. They consider him to be a deity. Maybe, he doesn't have a stuntman. Maybe he could protect them.
The scientists at InfoWars Life have created a powerful formula for inflammatory support and joint support. Discover the power of ancient medicine with Bodies. Bodies contains one of the most potent forms of turmeric available. Turmeric has been used for thousands of years and is one of the most studied herbals today. It is well known in traditional medicine for its soothing properties. Our pure turmeric extract plus piperine from black pepper makes for optimal absorption to help boost and support your flexibility, mobility, joint function, immune system, and so much more. Regular turmeric root from the store only contains 1 to 5% of active ingredients, but our turmeric root extract contains over 95% of the active ingredients. Bodies combines turmeric with organic herbs such as spearmint, sage, lemon balm, and thyme to work synergistically for full body support. Try Bodies today at InfoWarsLife.com or call us at 188-253-3139.